I swore I wouldn't do it, but I did it again. I bought another piece of painted furniture. This macaroni and cheese, or maybe it's mayo and mustard colored desk, was perfect for an Instagram challenge with an Art Deco theme. You won't believe what this looks like after I'm done with it, so keep watching. I took a chance with this, hoping that I would find beautiful wood underneath all of this paint. Things first, we had to see what was underneath it. For this project, I'm using a new stripper. This is GreenEZ. I've never used it before, but I've heard great things about it, and most of all, I like it because it's more environmentally friendly than many of the other strippers, and it is soy-based. So I spread a nice thick layer of the GreenEZ. It's kind of like a gel across the top of the desk. And then because it's a warm spring day, I went ahead and covered it with some plastic so that it wouldn't dry too fast, and then left it to sit for about an hour. When I came back to check on it, I could tell that the stripper was working its magic. You can see where the paint is bubbling up and the texture is changing. I grabbed some gloves and a paint scraping tool and tested it out. I am also using a cardboard box to catch the paint as I strip it from the furniture. Look at this. I am extremely happy with this. I'm not having to apply too much pressure, and a lot of it is coming off super easy. And more importantly, I'm finding some really beautiful veneer underneath it. It looks like the person who painted this did not sand down the top coat that was protecting the veneer. So the paint is coming off, but the top coat and the stain on the veneer is not, which is actually a really good thing because that has probably protected it for many years. So I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed that I continue to find this gorgeous veneer. This product is fantastic. I left it on maybe an hour, maybe a little bit less, and I have never had paint come off this easy before. Most of the paint was coming off really easily from the top of the desk. I would have to work a little bit on the curved part and the front face of it. Using a cardboard box to catch the drippings was super easy, and then what I do is I just leave that box in the sun till it dries up, and then it's safe to throw away. I decided not to apply another layer of the paint stripper, but instead I grabbed one of my tools. This is a 5-in-1 painter's tool, and I'm just kind of gently trying to lift some of that paint off of the dresser, hoping that maybe the stripper did its work but just wasn't quite done. I don't want to get too aggressive with it because I definitely don't want to scratch the finish. But as you can see, this is helping get some of that extra paint off before I come back in with some paint remover or acetone to get that last layer of paint. After I had scraped off as much as I could, I then went ahead and got some acetone, and first attempt, I'm just going over it with a little scrub brush to kind of loosen the larger chunks of paint, get any of the stripping residue off of the piece of furniture, and remove the paint from the wood grain. This is a technique that I have found works really well when using acetone, is to lay down paper towels and pour the acetone over it. This prevents the product from running off of the furniture, and it also prevents it from evaporating really quickly and gives it some time to soak into the wood. Once it has soaked in, then typically you can just lift up the paper towel and start scraping away. Here we go. And this will also start to remove some of that finish that was underneath the paint so that I can get down to the natural wood veneer. Went ahead and grabbed my Carbide Scraper because I want to be really careful not to damage the veneer, but I do want to get as much of this paint off of it as I possibly can. And now, after the acetone has worked its magic, I'm able to use the Carbide Scraper to get that last bit of paint and also start removing that old top coat. I keep plenty of little paper towels handy to wipe it away as I go. This is a really tedious, time-consuming way to do this, but because of the age of this dresser, the curved top, and the thinness of the veneer, I really want to sand as little as possible and try to remove as much of the old finish by hand as I can. This is just one way to preserve that gorgeous curved waterfall front. Then I'm just going to keep moving down the desk, doing the same thing, saturating paper towels with acetone, letting it soften up the finish in the paint, and then removing it with my carbide scraper. This desk had some little trim that had been added to the front of it, and it was broken in a couple places, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. It's just held in place with some little tiny nails, so my painter's tool took it off pretty easily, and then that allows me to get in underneath there, clean it up, remove that extra paint, and then I'm going to have to find some type of trim to add back onto it once I am done cleaning it up. But so far it's looking really good, and the entire waterfall front was in great shape. For the sides, instead of using a chemical stripper, what I'm doing is I'm just going to use my carbide scraper. I have found that typically the sides of furniture do not have as much top coat, varnish, lacquer, whatever is on it as the top does. And they're also usually drier because they don't get as much furniture polish, they don't get as much oil from hands, so that the paint will actually be dry and come off really easy with just a carbide scraper. So here you go. You can see we're scraping. I am wearing a mask because this does produce dust even though I'm not sanding. And yes, I did do a lead test before I started working on the piece of furniture to make sure that there's no lead-based paint or other materials that I need to worry about. What feels like hours later, I finally have the top and the two sides stripped. You can see that they're not in the best condition. I am going to have to do a little bit of sanding to get the remaining top coat off of it, get down to the natural wood. For the top of the desk, I am using my hand sanding pad here. I am using a 120 grit sandpaper. I usually start with an 80 grit, but to protect this wood veneer, and especially the curved part, I don't want to use something that's that coarse, so I started with a 120. After I'm done with the 120, then I will go over it with a 220 and then a 400 to get it nice and smooth. You do have to be kind of careful going over the edge here because you want to get the old finish off, but you want to make sure that you're preserving that veneer and not rubbing it thin, especially on the waterfall front. I had my air blower handy, so I went ahead and used it to clean off the dust. And then I wiped it down. And now what I'm going to do is go in with more acetone and steel wool. I'm using 0000 steel wool, so it won't scratch or damage the wood, but it will get in there and it'll get any of those last remnants of paint, especially any that are caught in the wood grain out of it. It's also just one last thorough cleaning to make sure that I've got all of the wood stripping residue off of it. And you could see as I'm adding the acetone, the natural color of this veneer is just so pretty. I can't wait to see what it looks like once I add a little bit of wood oil and some polyurethane to it. I just love the details on the front of this desk, especially down here at the base. So what I'm going to do is I'm using the acetone and I'm pouring it in there, letting it sit for a moment. And then I'm going to come over, first of all, with this brush to just kind of get as much as I can out out of each of those little crevices and all of the cracks. And then I'm probably going to have to come back in with a smaller brush and really try to work each area to remove that. I don't want to risk using a detail sander. I don't want to risk damaging the wood, especially where it has some really cool veneer and a beautiful pattern. And I also just didn't feel like using the chemical stripper. So I'm doing this all by hand. I've already been working on this project for about 4 hours today, and I want to try to get everything stripped as much as I can on day one of working on this project. In addition to working on furniture, I do have a full-time job. I work in higher education and I help support students through their educational journey. I'm very fortunate that I have a very flexible job and I work remotely a lot of the time from home. So that enables me to work on my projects a little bit in the morning before work, and sometimes I can come outside and get some things done during my lunch hour as well. So now you can see I've gotten the majority of it removed, but I'm using a toothbrush here to get into the corners and all of the crevices. This, like I said, this is tedious work, but I'm really hoping that the end results will be 100% worth it. I also have this little pick that I grabbed at the craft store that I can use to get in there and kind of scrape any of the stubborn finishes off. I feel like I'm what is it? Not a periodontist, a dental hygienist. I feel like I'm a dental hygienist today working on this with my toothbrushes and then my pick. But it's actually coming off pretty well, and the wood underneath is really beautiful. So I'm excited. I think I'm going to be able to salvage a lot of the natural wood on this piece. I was really hoping that I wasn't going to just remove paint to then have to add paint, but it looks like a lot of this is in really good shape. I decided that it would be fun to do a time-lapse video when I put the stripper on the drawers. So I used the same process. I spread a thick layer of the stripper, covered it with plastic, and you can actually see it working in this video. It is just so cool. And then look how easy it removes. After I did the first coat, I went in and I dabbed a little bit onto any of the stubborn spots, let it sit, and came back and they just wiped right off. And then I followed the same process that I did with the top of the dresser, going over each of the drawers with some acetone to remove any of the remaining paint or wood stripper. Once again, using the paper towel method of putting a paper towel down first, pouring the acetone over the paper towel, and then letting it sit for a moment or two until it has worked its magic and it's ready to be wiped off. Acetone, it is a chemical and it can be very drying on your skin. So you'll notice that I tend to wear gloves whenever I'm going to be touching the product or anything that has the product on it. And even though you can't see my face, I am wearing a mask and working outside so that I'm not breathing in the chemical smells. Please make sure that you're always using protective equipment and taking care of yourself when you're working on your furniture projects. I'm using my Carbide Scraper to remove the finish from the fronts of the drawers, and this is working really well with the combination of the acetone and the Carbide Scraper. There you can see on the long drawer how it's removing that old top coat, so that will give me a fresh new wood finish that I can work with. I'm finally at the end of day one, so I just wanted to show you again what it looked like when we started, and here's what it looks like now. The top is in really good shape except for some damage along the back edge, and I think what I can do is add some decorative trim to cover that up. The sides look pretty good. There's some missing veneer and some damage along the bottom, so I might be able to do either some trim or a paint design. The drawers are going to need some work, especially that drawer there on the left. There's a lot of damage, but I am thinking that I will be able to use a combination of wood filler and paint. Here on the top, I've stood it up now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going in where there's missing veneer and putting a wood filler to fill that in. This is a easy to use product. You can get them in different colors. This just happens to be the color that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and use it. And it's not going to match exactly, but I do have some wood paints that I can then use to blend and do a color match. Or I'm thinking I'm probably going to end up adding a piece of wood trim to the back edge of the top of this desk because there is so much damage on this piece. Some of the veneer was also lifting away on the sides. So what I did is I applied wood glue between the veneer and the desk, and then I used weights and clamps to hold it in place. Now I'm going to pay some attention to the fronts of these drawers. I do have my sanding pad here. So first things first is I'm just going to go and I'm going to sand each of the drawers to remove any of the old varnish that was on them. I want to get them down to the natural wood, and then I'll be able to get an idea of how much repair I'm going to have to do and whether or not I can salvage them or if I'm going to need to come up with some type of maybe a paint and stain combo. I'm being really gentle with these because I do love this wood pattern and the design, and I am really hoping that I will be able to salvage and fix these drawers. After I sanded down the drawers, I did a little trick that I like to do, and I grabbed some brown paper bag. I put it on my sanding block, and I'm going over the surface of each drawer. This brown paper bag, it's the equivalent of a really super high grit sandpaper, and it's just very gentle, but it gets rid of any final imperfections, any little bits of leftover varnish or top coat, and gives it a really super smooth finish. I do think I'm going to be able to save the natural wood. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to use some of this quick wood to fill in the old drawer pulls. The pulls that were on this desk were not original to it. They had been added at a later date, probably when the new paint was added to it. Quickwood, this is an epoxy product. So what you do is you cut off the amount that you think that you're going to need, and then you blend it together. You kind of rub it like you would clay or Play-Doh until the two colors have blended into one. So you'll notice I am wearing a glove to protect my skin. And sometimes if you're doing a larger amount, it helps to kind of break it into smaller bits. And then I like to also use cardboard to rub it on. And for drawer holes, what I have found to be really helpful is once I get it blended, I will roll it on the cardboard and make it into these thin little rolls that then you can just slide right into that existing drawer hole, and then smooth it until you get the hole filled. You want to overlap the top just a little bit because you're going to come back when you're done and sand it smooth to get it flush to the wood. I'll then repeat this same process with all 4 drawers, working pretty quickly because I want to make sure I get this product in place before it starts to dry, and then I'll let it dry at least overnight before I come back in and sand it or do anything else to it. The next day, you can see that the quickwood has dried. It's nice and hard and it is sandable. So now I'm coming in with my small little sanding pad and trying to remove anywhere that I added the quickwood that it wasn't flush with the wood, just by gently sanding it and going over the direction of the wood in the same direction the wood grain goes. So you can see that I'm doing a diagonal sand on the center of these drawers where it has the wood grain going in that diagonal direction, but then I'm turning the drawer whenever I do the opposite side or whenever I do the tops or the bottoms. You always want to sand in the direction of the wood grain, so that way if you get any scratches, you apply too much pressure, you won't really be able to tell because it'll just blend with the natural wood grain. Once I got it sanded down and it felt pretty flush with the face of the drawer, then I just grabbed some water that was handy on a piece of paper towel and wiped it down. And look at that. You can see just with water how gorgeous this is going to be once these drawers are done. After a couple days of filling in missing veneer with quick wood or adding in wood filler, doing a lot of sanding, I'm ready to kind of start working on the design of the piece. I found this really cool piece of wood trim at my local Home Depot. And I love the repeating pattern of the squares. I think it is perfect for an Art Deco inspired piece. And I have decided that I am going to use this dark emerald green. The color is called Jacob's Well, and it is by Melange Paints. This is an all-in-one paint, so it has a primer and a top coat in it. Look how pretty that is going to be. I'm probably going to have to put several different coats on that because it is very raw wood. I'm also going to paint the trim on the top and sides of the desk. It extends down the side, curving, and then it's on the inside here. It's not really pretty wood, and I think it's going to actually accentuate the piece more by painting this little bit of trim in this gorgeous dark green. But I am keeping the majority of this piece natural wood. I really think it's fun when you can kind of play around with color, and you can see that the dark green goes really well with the reddish natural wood tone. I also painted the wood trim underneath the middle drawer, and then I'm repeating the process of painting the trim on the opposite side of the dresser. I'm using a small little paintbrush by Zebra, and this brush gives me enough control that you'll notice that I have not taped off the edges, because I'm pretty confident that if I am just careful and use long, slow strokes, that I don't need to take the time to paint. This is just kind of fun to watch it fill in. And if I do get a little bit of paint on the inside or anywhere that I don't want it to, I can just come right in and wipe it off immediately, or come back in once it's dried with a little bit of gentle sandpaper and brush it off. Not only is painter's tape expensive, but I also feel guilty when I use a lot of painter's tape, because you can really only use it once and get it to really stick well. And I feel that I owe it to our environment to be as environmentally friendly and as cost conscious as I can. So here I am now, just doing this outside curved piece of trim, once again using the same paintbrush and just being very careful to only get the paint where I want it. It took 3 coats of paint to get the trim to be the nice dark color that I wanted. It was a very dry piece of wood, and I did gently sand it in between each coat of paint to make sure that it was nice and smooth. It would have been quicker and easier to spray these, but I do find that I feel like it wastes a lot of paint when you're spraying something small like this because of the overspray, and there is something really satisfying about watching the paint go on by hand with a brush. After the sides of the desk had been cleaned and gently sanded, I found that they were a little bit splotchy. So what I decided to do was apply a thin layer of this gel stain. This is a gel stain by Dixie Belle Paints. This color is called Tobacco Road. And what this is going to do is it's going to help even out the wood, and it's also going to just gently kind of tone down the reds and the oranges on the side of the piece of the furniture. So I'm just applying a nice thin layer using this little kitchen sponge that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. And once I get it all over, then I'm coming back in with a towel to wipe off the excess, because I don't really want to change the color drastically. I just kind of want to even out the splotchiness. Now that my wood trim is painted and dry, I'm going to go ahead and put this in place. I'm just nailing it across the front using some little nails. I'm going to use about 6 of them. I'll start in the center to make sure that I've got it nice and lined up with the bottom of the top of the dresser there. Kind of just putting it in under the edge, and then I'll come back in and dab a bit of paint on the nail if it shows. And then I'll go ahead and add more nails across the front of it. I didn't feel like I needed to necessarily glue this down because it is a nice sturdy piece of wood, and by applying the nails about every 4 inches, it's not going to move. It's going to stay in place. Oh my gosh, I absolutely love the way this wood trim looks, and I think the design on it is perfect for Art Deco. And so this is how the back piece is going to look. It's going to do 2 things. It's going to add to the design, but it's also going to cover up those areas that I had to use wood filler to fix the veneer damage. Once all of the drawers were cleaned up and any damage had been repaired, what I decided to do is just use a wipe-on polyurethane to bring out the shine and to protect the wood. This is a warm satin finish. I rub it on with, in this case, I'm using a sponge to rub it on, let it sit overnight, come in and gently sand it, and then repeat that process 3 times. While I spent a lot of time repairing the veneer on the drawers, I decided to use paint to hide some of the veneer damage on the inside of the desk. So what I'm going to do is I am going to do a kind of a triangle design on the inside of each leg, slanting in, bringing the paint down to cover all of the veneer damage on the bottom of it. So first things first, we've got to get our tape lined up. I am just going from corner to corner to get it nice and straight and even, and then I will mirror that on the other side. Now, sometimes I'll go over the edge of my tape with a little bit of polyurethane or shellac or something to seal it, but I feel like this went on pretty smoothly, and because I'm only doing the paint in one direction, I think I can paint it on without getting any bleed underneath the tape. I might regret this, but that's the approach that I took at this time. And you can see it took me like 4 or 5 tries to get it in there perfectly straight. So, you know, don't be fooled by the videos that make it look super easy because it is a lot of work to do this type of design. Adding a little tape down there in the bottom where I cut it a little bit too short. I'm going to apply the paint using a brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint down and away from the tape. This way, when I use the brush on the area where the tape and the wood meet, I will be brushing down and won't be forcing any of the paint up into and underneath the tape. At least that's my plan. So I'm just going to keep doing this, long strokes, brushing down, starting at the taped edge, and then going all the way down to the bottom. I applied 3 coats of paint, letting it dry thoroughly between each coat. And now for the tape pull. Here we go. Yes, no bleed. So that technique of painting down and away from the tape seemed to work pretty well for me. I'm going to mirror that same angle on the outside of the the desk. So instead of taking the tape from corner to corner, what I did is I measured the triangle that I painted on the inside to see how high it came up, and then I brought my tape to mirror that same size. A lot of Art Deco is about repeating patterns, so I want that same pattern to be repeated on all 4 sides, both the outside and the inside of this desk. And then I'm going to use the same technique that I used on the inside. I applied my tape, pushed it down nice and firm, and then I'm going to take my brush strokes starting just over the edge of the tape and then bring them down the side of the dresser, making sure not to push any paint up and under that tape. Moment of truth when we go in for the tape pull. You can see how the pattern is replicated from the inside to the outside with the same angle. And here we go. And yes, it's pulling off nice and even and giving me a super crisp, straight line. This tape is working wonderfully. It's always a reason to celebrate when you get a nice, smooth, straight paint line. Now I'm going to add a design element. I found this stencil. It's kind of a palm leaf is what it reminds me of. And repeating patterns are very common with Art Deco furniture, as well as the use of gold. So I am using a gold paint to stencil this leaf pattern onto the sides. My plan is to use gold paint where I have the green base coat, and then use green paint where it's the natural wood for kind of a flipped look. So I'm hoping that'll look good, but there's only one way to tell, and that's by putting it on there. Here's where I switch to the green paint. That will be on the natural wood. Some of these will have a split design, part gold, part green, but I'm thinking it's going to look pretty cool. Fingers crossed. Now's the scary part when I gently lift away the stencil, and so far so good. I didn't get any smearing. It doesn't look like there was any bleeding underneath it. I'm kind of liking the transition between the gold and the green, so I'm going to let this part of the stencil dry overnight, and then in the morning I'll come in and do the next part of it. So the next day when the paint is nice and dry, the stencil is dry, I've applied it, taped it down, and I'm getting ready to go in with my paint to continue the pattern. At this point, I wasn't sure if I was going to do kind of a triangle shape or if I was going to do it angled up the side of the dresser to mirror the paint line. Right here is where things went awry. If you'll notice, I picked up the gold paint to continue extending the pattern of the gold leaf, and I should have been using the green because I'm doing it on the natural wood. So somehow in my mind, I got my pattern reversed and screwed up and grabbed the gold instead of the green. Now, the day that I was doing this, I didn't even notice that I had gotten the pattern wrong at this point. I just kept going. I would let it dry, put the stencil back in place, picked up the gold paint again, and kept going. It wasn't until later in the day that I realized that I had made a mistake, and at that point, I either had to remove it all and start over, or go with it. And you know what? I decided sometimes mistakes happen for a reason. So I decided to go with it and keep using the gold and just have that one little area be green. I think it might actually provide a really cool contrast when I'm done. You'll have to let me know in the comment sections what you think. Do that final stencil lift, and here we go. I'm a little bit nervous about this. I think some people are going to like it. I think some people are going to hate it. And honestly, I'm still kind of 50-50, but like I said earlier, I think sometimes mistakes happen for a reason, so I'm going to go with it. Now it's time to put the new hardware on. I have this cool little tool that I use that I can align these different rulers to find the exact middle of the drawer and the height where I want to apply the hardware based on the hole. I'm using these cute little triangle drawer pulls that I think really fit with the Art Deco theme. The great thing about this tool is once I have it measured and in place for one drawer, then I can just lift it, put it on the next drawer, and it's set and ready to go. It has a little hole punch here that you punch down, and you've got your starting hole for your drill. Then I can just grab my drill and drill the hole and add the hardware. I always keep a supply of little washers on hand because sometimes, depending on the width of the wood, the screws might be a little bit too big or too small, and in this situation I did have to add some washers to the back of the screws to get them to fit in nice and tightly. Finishing touches for this piece is I ordered this really cool diamond patterned green Art Deco peel and stick wallpaper off of Amazon. This is the brand, and it even came with this adorable little sticker. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm sure I'll find something. So after I measured my drawer, then I cut the paper, but I first looked at the pattern because I wanted the diamonds to be centered on the drawer. So I got it in place where it would be centered, and then I went through the process of cutting, peeling, and sticking and putting it in place. I always start from the edge closest to the front of the drawer because that's where any little minor errors are going to be the least visible. And then once I have the paper straight and in place, what I do is I will then remove the rest of the backing and smooth from the middle of the paper out towards the edges. This is really great paper. It's very sticky. It's a nice weight. I really am quite impressed with it. So right there, you go from the middle out to the edges, and then just use a little craft knife to remove any of the excess. Ah, this pattern is so pretty. I just love it. Of course, adding decorative wallpaper to the drawers isn't necessary if the drawers are in good shape, but for this competition, I really wanted it to have that extra wow factor. And then finally, I'm going to go in and I'm going to treat the wood on the outsides and bottoms of all of the drawers. I love this product. You'll find the link for it in the description. Not only does it bring the wood back to life and moisturize it, but it has a really nice kind of citrusy smell. And this is just the type of thing that's going to make sure that the drawers slide smoothly and that they look really beautiful when your customer is checking it out, deciding whether or not they want to buy it. Let's take a quick look back at where we started with this kind of low-key, cool, vintage retro look. And here's what it looks like now. Amazing. I am so happy that this beautiful piece of furniture was underneath all of that mac and cheese, mayo, mustard, whatever color you want to call it. Look at that veneer and the detail work on those drawers. It's absolutely beautiful. I love restoring furniture. There's the stencil. Like I said, I left the pattern as it was. I think it turned out kind of cool, and I actually really like it now. And then that pop of color when you open up the drawer for a fun surprise. You can see how the wood trim hid all of the flaws. And this isn't a makeover that's going to make me a lot of money, but sometimes it's about the artistry and learning new things and doing something fun. So I would love for you to follow me on my furniture makeover journey. My name's Carmen. Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to getting to know you.